Well, hello everybody, and this is Auntie, and I am coming to you with a review of George Pino boat crash trial, which has just started. I'm going to be reviewing day one, and my question to you is, who is accountable? Let's get into it, shall we? Oh, yes, we shall.
A sweet old auntie. Thank you, subscribers, to my listening reviews. All of y'all who have been here through the long haul. Shall we get into it? Oh, yes, we shall. It's time for Auntie's advice. Sweet old. It's time for Auntie's advice. Oh, yeah. It's time for Auntie's advice.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're going to be talking about the state of Florida versus George Pino. And I am so glad that you all are here tonight. If you have not already done so, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell so that every time I go live, you go live with me. This is a very riveting case, especially for those of us who have children and we send them out to hang with their friends and tragedy strikes. On September the 4th of 2002, Miami real estate developer George Pino took his wife, his 17-year-old daughter, and 11 of her teenage friends out on his 29-foot boat for a Labor Day weekend outing. The group spent the day enjoying the water and eventually headed towards Boca Chica Key, a popular destination. Let me bring his picture up. There we go. I want y'all to see who we talking about. As the boat approached the area, the prosecutor says that Pino was operating the vessel at a high rate of speed when it struck a fixed channel marker. The impact was catastrophic. All 14 people aboard were thrown into the water. Here is the boat that they was on. These are the damages to that particular vessel. Can you imagine walking or swimming away from that? The two girls that were most prominently discussed in the case are Lucy Fernandez and Katy, and neither was George's daughters. They were not his daughters. The two Pino's daughter was also on the boat that day along with many of her friends, and the outing was reportedly organized around his daughter's friend group, which included Lucy and Katy. All 14 occupants were thrown into the water when the boat struck the channel marker. Lucy later died from her injuries, while Katy survived but suffered a traumatic brain injury lasting disabilities. One reason the case has drawn so much attention to myself and probably to you is that Pino was not transporting strangers, because many of the passengers that were on that boat were teenagers who were friends with his daughter, and he had been trusted. Okay, the parents trusted him with their most precious cargo, and that's their children. He was operating that bus. I mean, oh my goodness, it's bus boat. Several of those teenagers, those 11 teenagers who were friends with his daughter, suffered serious injuries. 17-year-old Lucy suffered devastating injuries and was rushed to the hospital. And despite medical efforts, she later died. When we get to, I think it's trial day 4, we're going to hear testimony from her father about that night. I am only on day 1, so bear with me. I will catch up. Another teenager known as Kay suffered, like I said, brain injuries that has just totally devastated her life. Following the investigation, what they have found allegedly is, and what they are charging him with is vessel homicide, boating under the influence, manslaughter, and several counts of boating under the influence causing serious bodily harm. Now, the state alleges that he was impaired, okay, and operating the boat recklessly. When that crash happened, the defense argues that the evidence doesn't support that, and that the state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that impairment caused this accident. So the trial is basically centering around this devastating boat crash in 2022, resulting in the death of Lucy. So, on day 1, in the opening statements, the prosecutors told jurors this case is ultimately about responsibility and accountability. Let me introduce the prosecution team. We have Laura Adams. She is the assistant state attorney and lead prosecutor on this case. Jonathan Borst, assistant state attorney, and Juan Ramirez. He is a law student intern, and he's assisting the prosecution in this case. And so, according to the state, George took his wife, his daughter, and a group of teenage friends out on his boat to celebrate his daughter's 18th birthday. And after they had spent the afternoon at a popular sandbar where alcohol was available and consumed by both the adults and allegedly the teenagers, they began to head back to Ocean Reef for a birthday celebration planned later that evening. So the prosecution is alleging and arguing that as Pino returned through Cutter Bank Channel, he operated the boat recklessly. They say that GPS data that was recovered from the vessel showed he was traveling on the wrong side of the channel and accelerating from approximately 43 to 47 miles per moment before crashing directly into the channel marker 15, which is a large steel navigation marker designed to help the boaters safely navigate their waterways. And so the state emphasized that the GPS data is their most important witness. That's who's going to be showing up. Mr. or Mrs. GPS. The prosecutors argued that the GPS records do not forget, they don't lie, and cannot be influenced by money, power, or sympathy. According to their analysis, Pino remained on a collision course with the marker for approximately 9 seconds and never took meaningful evasive action before impact. This for me is almost like the Murdaugh trial. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Murdaugh trial, but it reminds me a lot of Paul, who was on the waterways with his friends. They had hopped out and had drinks, and then came back, and he was uncontrollable, in a drunken stupor, and basically had a crash himself. It reminds me a lot of that. Let me know downtown in the chat if it reminds you of the same thing. The crash was catastrophic, y'all. Prosecutors went on to describe how the boat struck the marker, ripped open along its side, filled with water, and eventually flipped over. Again, here is a picture of the boat. It ripped open, as we can see, along the side, and it immediately filled with water. You can see the big gaping hole in the vessel. And they said in the chaos that followed, the teenagers desperately searched for one another. Again, it reminds me a lot of the Murder trial. Lucy was eventually discovered unconscious underwater, while rescuers and other people, Good Samaritans, performed CPR, and emergency responders rushed her towards medical care. Lucy, of course, we all know, ultimately drowned. The prosecution's theory is not that George intended to hurt anyone. In fact, they are specifically acknowledging that this is not a murder case and that there is no evidence he deliberately struck the marker. But if you are in a car accident, whether you deliberately hit someone and cause death, right, it doesn't make a difference. I don't believe that this case should be based on intent. They said he didn't intend to hurt anyone, but he was, in my opinion, reckless in his behavior, knowing that he was responsible for all these souls that were on this boat, and he should not have been, if he was indeed driving under the influence. You shouldn't operate a pencil while you are under the influence of anything. So I don't know, how they're going to, counterpunch this as far as intent. Maybe he didn't intend to hurt anyone, but not only did people get hurt on the boat, but someone was killed. They are continuing to argue that a combination of poor decisions, operating at excessive speed, failing to maintain a proper lookout, traveling on the wrong side of the channel, consuming alcohol, and carrying a boat full of distracted teenagers, equally, like, this amounted to reckless conduct and culpable negligence. The state also alleged that he attempted to avoid responsibility. The investigators testified that immediately after the crash, he claimed another vessel created a large wake that forced him to take evasive action, causing him to lose control. But honey, the prosecutors argued that GPS evidence disproves that explanation. He can take that and throw that out the window. They contended there was no other boats forcing him off the course, and that he repeated the same thing, the same account, even later during his civil litigation. The defense, however, presented a very different picture. Look at him. Hot Mess Express. This is so freaking horrible. And again, it reminds me of when I trust people with my child. But anyway, this ain't about my child. Let me stay focused. The defense is being led by Howard, and child, I know I'm gonna jack his name up, so let me spell it: Srebnick. Cause y'all know I will jack a name up over here. I gotta laugh at myself. They say that he's one of Florida's best known criminal defense attorneys. Um, he agree that Lucy's death was a heartbreaking tragedy, but argue that tragedy does not automatically equal criminal conduct. It doesn't make a difference. They told the jurors that George loved Lucy like one of his own children and had known her for years. They emphasized that his own wife and daughter were aboard the boat and argued that he would never intentionally place them in danger. If you drinking, then intentionality goes out the window. Again, we're going to really have to talk about this intention. Okay? We've got to talk about this intention because for me, that matters. And I haven't been looking at the comment section. And welcome everybody. Thank y'all for being here. For me, I'm really watching, right? In watching this trial, and I really want to see what happens with this intention. Y'all let me know what's standing out in this trial to you all. And so the defense went on and child and was talking and pointed out that the weather was clear, the water was calm, and there was no posted speed limits in Cutterbank Channel. They are arguing the fact that operating that boat at approximately 47 miles per hour was not illegal and was a speed that he could safely travel, and he had safely traveled it many times before. Okay. They also pushed back against any suggestion that alcohol played a significant role. Did alcohol play a role, period? Should he have been drinking behind the wheel? I don't see a boat being any different than a car, but y'all let me know downtown in the comment section. They're saying that the alcohol may have played a role, right? This is my assumption, but that it wasn't a significant role. According to the defense, right, multiple witnesses, including adults at the bar, law enforcement officers, and even Lucy's father observed that George that day did not believe he was impaired. They argued that if Lucy's own father thought that he wasn't intoxicated, he never would have allowed his daughters to ride back on that boat. So basically, what they're trying to say is that the defense says that this was a terrible accident. The prosecution says it was the predictable results of reckless decisions. So the central question here that the jurors are going to have to decide is whether George conduct amounted to criminal negligence and recklessness, or whether this was simply a tragic accident that no one intended and no one could have reasonably foreseen. Adding yet another layer to this was the moment in the proceedings where the trial was interrupted, when George became visibly emotional in court. I said, I know that this is not what we're doing. This is what we're doing. The judge was, in my opinion, pissed with this display. And she was quite vocal that she did not want this to affect the jury. She didn't believe that the jury should have even witnessed him become emotional with that outburst. And she feels like that maybe this could influence the proceedings. So, guess what she did? Recessed, took a brief recess for him to get his together. The medical personnel were called in to evaluate him, right? And the remaining the remaining proceedings for the day were suspended, and they resumed again the next day. I want to show you a picture of the young ladies who were affected by this. Hold on, let me bring those pictures up. This is a picture of Lucy. Let me get that. And this is a picture of the other young lady who survived but is going to have a long journey. If y'all are not watching this trial, watch this trial with me. I'm very interested in seeing its outcome. Um, it is unfortunate. I will, as the week goes on, get more information about this. I'll be talking about this trial. Even if the video is 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we'll be talking about it. You're absolutely right, Giselle. This is so sad. Imagine how you would feel if you sent your child out on a trip with her peers and she doesn't come back home alive. The father's testimony today was absolutely devastating. How they went to the hospital and they had to see her that way, knowing that there was a strong likelihood that she would not walk away from this accident based on what they saw. In the courtroom today, he had to relive it by looking at pictures. Trials are always interesting to me because you got to relive everything. You got to go back. You may have been moving forward and wanting to go to or be at a place of healing. Remember, this happened in 2022, almost 4 solid years ago. And this family has had to learn how to cope with the loss of their daughter, their beloved daughter. And at the same time, when people do things like this, what Mr. Pino has been accused of doing, his family got to live with this too. His daughter has to lose with the possible loss of her father, as well as losing with the loss of her friend, and everybody being traumatized. I know for me, I probably would never, ever, ever, never, ever go on a boat again, having survived such a tragic, catastrophic event, being thrown into the water. Maybe some of them even saw it coming. Maybe they was trying to get his attention. We're going to find out all of that during this trial. So again, if you have not already done so, hit that subscribe button and join me as we talk about the George Pino boat crash trial. Until we meet again, y'all be safe out there in those streets. And what do I always say? And in the water. Thanks for being here.